It's about listening rather than speaking. Sometimes it's about learning new things and discovering that maybe we don't know everything. And welcome everyone back to another episode of Humanity 2.0 podcast, where we are talking to fellow humans about humanity. Today's guest is Jim Marshall, who is an author on Septimics, and we cannot wait to find out more about what that means and what it means to see the world through Jim's eyes, as he has studied humanity more than probably most of us have been around. So Jim, welcome. Thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
Hi, Vanessa. Happy to see you.
What does humanity mean to you?
Well, it could be defined a couple of different ways. Typically, people define it as being all the Homo sapiens living on Earth. But I suspect from many sources that I've heard that there are people that look just like us on other planets. So it probably includes them too.
And how about to you? What does humanity mean to you specifically?
Well, I use language according to whatever definition is applicable. So it could mean either of those things.
Okay. On a daily basis, when you're out on a walk, do you observe humanity at its best or at its worst? Or do you think that we're just moving along?
Well, I try to take everything as it's presented. There are wonderful people who I adore, and there are some very evil people who need to be stopped. So it depends on, who I'm looking at. Fortunately, I will say, I've spent most of my life around clergy, artists, and intellectuals. So I really haven't seen too many of the bad people myself.
Is there one particular story of any one of those people that sticks out and is something that you hold dear, any interaction or any moment that they gave you that just inspired your outlook on humanity?
Well, I have known some saints, and you can almost see the halo around their head. When I saw them, I knew exactly what I was looking at. So I've known several of them. And of course, those are the most highly evolved humans.
Can you elaborate more on what they were like and just how you felt around them?
Well, it was a very pleasant feeling. But it was also a kind of some surprise because there aren't too many people like that. But I knew right away I was looking at somebody very special. I could just see it. Now, if you get into my book, the first chapter in the book talks about the scale of basic purposes, and the highest purpose of all is to transcend. And those people I call saints. So eventually this found its way into my book.
What is that area where it shows the percentage of humanity in each category? What does that mean?
It's demographics. It's what percentage of humanity is at that level.
Can you tell everyone more about those higher percentages and why they are in that category?
Well, those are two completely different questions. A person is either at a level or isn't at a level. This is natural law. It's like a tulip and a rose, It's not an opinion that it's a tulip or a rose. Now, of course, every tulip is unique, every rose is unique, but once you know what they are, you can always tell the difference between every tulip and every rose because they're distinct. And that is what the levels are like. That is what my book teaches. Of course, 35 axes. So you're asking me about one axis, but it would be better if I tell you, your viewers, in a general sense, what this is about, so they have a context. Because most of them haven't seen that sample chapter that you've seen.
We will go more into the book for sure. I do want you to have the opportunity to roll out the concept on Septimics, because I can guarantee you there are a lot of people that have never come across that.
Oh, yeah.
Before we go there, what is your perspective on humanity in its current state? And do you feel that we can get better or that we can evolve? What are your thoughts there?
Certainly we can get better. I had an entire career of making people better. And when I say making, they did it. I just sort of showed them the way. The person has to improve himself. Nobody can force you to get better. But I had a long career as a human development engineer. Let me give you one sentence to put this in context with Septimics. I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena. which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septimics, and published it in the book, Septimics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomenon. So that's what I'm here to discuss.
What was it that led you to write and to research?
Okay. Well, really, the story really begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, of course, I thought at that time that I would be engineering physical things like all the other engineers thought. Airfoils, motors, electrons, or whatever. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche, because it is the area of greatest unknown, of greatest mystery, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the boss, don't understand somebody running for Congress. That's why more than 50% of the marriages in the United States end in divorce. Clearly, they didn't know what they were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And this book solves that across 35 axes. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. Septimics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septimics means of or pertaining to 7. Septimics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. Each of these scales are unique. There are 35 scales. Each is unique. And between them, because they're unique, they span the spectrum of human experience, meaning any problem, dilemma, difficulty, situation that any person has that has anything to do with people can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one. So, to make a long story short, answering your question, I had a long career as a human development engineer, using engineering tactics, strategies, principles, concepts on my clients to help them to evolve, to help them to attain higher levels of enlightenment, responsibility, ethics, mental clarity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of my clients improved as a result of our interaction. But incidentally, as this was going on, I started to notice that I could predict the outcome of the session. Now, I never told that to anyone in those days, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, I came to realize that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed and recorded. And as a result of our interaction, he would go up to the next level on that scale. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times over a 40-year period, many thousands of times. And every time it occurred, it verified my hypothesis, because the clients knew nothing about what I was doing. They had no idea what I was recording or what I was thinking. I said very little to my clients. I was mostly focused on getting them to examine what was going on in their lives. So you could say I used Socratic dialogue aided by biofeedback. So I essentially did the same thing that Socrates did in the famous Socratic dialogues, but the biofeedback made it from a cart into a rocket ship, where I could do it very fast on people. So by 1995, I had simply observed and recorded about 32 scales. There's no theory of septimics. This is all based on direct empirical observation. Now, another thing happened around that same time. I had a particular scale, a 6-level scale, that by then I absolutely knew was correct from decades of usage. And one day I was pondering a difficult client, and I realized that that client was at a level on that scale that I had not previously observed. In other words, it had a 7th level. As soon as I saw what that level was, it was obvious to me where to insert it into the 6th-level scale. That was not a question. And as soon as I inserted that 7th level into the 6th-level scale, the scale manifested mathematically. It went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. I said, whoa, because I had all of these mathematical interlocking, intersecting data. That's the scale that you saw on my website, that very scale. So when I saw that, having taken 26 semesters of math and having loved every minute of it, I knew right away this had to be natural law, because anything that has mathematics embedded in it is natural law, like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence. So then I said, I found something here. Then I asked myself, well, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that haven't been developed all the way, because you have to realize I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So knowing what I was looking for, I inspected all of these other scales. And in a short period of time, they all developed into 7-level scales. And as each one did, it manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 7-level scales, all based on direct observation of humans that had mathematics embedded in them. And so I said, this looks to me like a new subject. Because having gone to school for 28 years, I never saw anything like this before. Now, several people have asked me, what book is your book like? And being a well-read person, I have to say in all candor, I don't think there's ever been a book like this, at least on Earth. But I can tell you this, each of these 35 scales is expressed in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet. And each of those is comparable to the periodic table of elements. Now, if you recall the first time you saw the periodic table of elements in science, you were maybe 13 or 14 or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you said, as we all did, this makes sense. Hydrogen is here, lithium is 3. Yeah, it's all set up vertically and horizontally. It works. It's not counterintuitive. And so as science advanced, as we discovered new elements, Dmitri Mendeleev had 79. We have about 125 now. They just fitted right into the paradigm. So every science textbook and classroom in the world is using the periodic table. And I guarantee you, every advanced civilization in the universe has the periodic table. You cannot advance without it. Before Mendeleev discovered the periodic table, there was chemistry, but he revolutionized it. He made it easier to learn, to teach, and to understand. And that is what Septimics does on the subject of human development, because I'm giving you 35 periodic tables for human phenomena. And if I may, I'd like to tell you now the names of the 35 chapters, which will tell you exactly what subject matter is addressed in the book. So 24 of these scales I call individual scales, meaning they apply to an individual. And 11 of them are called group scales, meaning they apply primarily to a group. So these are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself can dramatically improve the life of the reader. And let me give you a direct example. I mentioned the scale of motivation. One of the most important things to know about a person is motivation. Why is this person doing this? That's how the police solve crime. They look for someone with a motive. If a person has no motive, he's not a suspect. That's how they proceed. So you could ask yourself, what is my mother's motivation toward me? What is my father's motivation toward me? What is my brother's motivation toward me? What is my boss's motivation toward me? Etc., etc., etc. And you could do this for everyone you know and everyone you have ever known, because you're only selecting from a menu of 7. I did the heavy lifting by getting it down to the 7 basic purposes, and all the others, the thousands of others, are just subsets of these. Now, you know the person, you read the chapter, I can see this person is at level 4. And when you spot that, you will have a realization. That explains why he does that. Then you could take that same scale and reverse the vector and say, what is my motivation toward my brother-in-law? What is my motivation toward my cousin? What is my motivation toward my boyfriend? So it's not their motivation toward you, it's your motivation toward them. And you could do this all over again another 200 or 300 or 400 times for everybody you've ever known. Now, by the time you finish this exercise, you will be greatly clarified in mind because you'll understand the motive of everyone toward you and yours toward them. That is a big clarification. Okay, now this is just one scale. You could do this for all 35 scales. Getting back to the answer about how this came about. So I had these now 32 scales. I said, wait a minute. I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to helping them by the millions if I put this in a book and get it out. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft was finished in December of 95. And I sent it out in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all loved it. They had different responses, but very positive responses. And that told me this is exactly what I think it is, a new subject that could really help people. I then spent the next 25 years of my life working on this book because realize first I had to discover the phenomena, and I pretty much already told you how I did that in my sessions, although I did find 3 more skills as I was writing the book. Then I had to take that data and I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system. That took 20 years because you have to understand, as an engineer, I'm only interested in results and facts. To engineers, opinions and beliefs are utterly irrelevant. In engineering, you cannot say, whoops, right? You can't have the plane fall out of the sky and say, whoops, I didn't get that one right. It's got to work, right? I mean, if you get a cell phone, you expect it to work. If it doesn't work, you call up Apple, you say, what have you given me here? This is a lemon, right? So that's what engineers are about. I went to a school, had 2,000 engineering students, and we were all like that. Okay? We wanted to know what's happening and how and why, period. Okay? So I was determined to make a philosophic system that would work for every person all the time, assuming they could read English. And I know I succeeded at that because some version of this book has existed now for 29 years. And I've been watching people get this. They get it. If you can read English reasonably well and you want to improve yourself or others, this book is for you. Now, some people think everyone wants to improve himself, and I'm sorry to tell you that's not true. There's all kinds of categories of people who have no interest in improving either themselves or others. This would include psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, professional criminals, corrupt politicians, war criminals, serial murderers, mentally ill people, ignoramuses. There's lots of categories of people who this book is not for them, not relevant to them. So if I tried to give this book to, let's say, John Gotti, the head of the Gambino crime family who died in prison, would say, I don't want this book, get out of here. Or he might say, is this going to help me make more money? I'd say, well, I don't know. Well, then I don't want to. So he would never read this book. But if he did read it, he wouldn't understand it. I can guarantee that. And even if he did understand it, he wouldn't apply it because it's contrary to his way of life, because this is about helping people and making people better and improving humanity. So that's what this is about. So this book gives you a roadmap for success across 35 axes. So I'm giving you the gradients. Let me tell you, if I may, how this is generally beneficial to people without going into specifics. I wrote this book to help people. I've had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group individual activity moves persons up these scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So I'm giving you a yardstick by which to measure human affairs, which is an entirely new thing. More importantly, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself inherently beneficial and enlightening. Because every time you correctly spot a level, as I said earlier, you have a realization. So here's what happens often with this book. A guy is reading the book, right? And he gets down to, let's say, the scale of choice, level 5. He says, wait a minute, this is my mother-in-law. See, he wasn't thinking about his mother-in-law. This describes her exactly. This is exactly how she behaves. How did he know that? I never met this guy's mother-in-law. I probably never even met the guy. There's people all over the world reading this book. I'm never going to meet them. How did I get it so exactly that he spotted it without even thinking about it? Because it's natural law. So this is in the same vein as Newton's 3 laws of motion. Newton's 3 laws of motion were true before Earth existed, and they will still be true after Earth no longer exists. But it wasn't until Newton figured them out 400 years ago and wrote them down and gave them to us that what we call physics today was founded. He was the father of physics. So how come nobody got it before? Good question. But you could say that about anything. How come Einstein figured out the theory of relativity in 1905 and nobody did before? It was all done mathematically. He just did the calculations, and at the end of the calculation, he got to E equals mc squared. Whoa! That's a game changer. So everybody in the math and science community knows how he figured it out. But how come he figured it out? Well, that's the path of humanity. Somebody figures it out, right? Before Nikola Tesla, there was no alternating current motor. He saw in his mind, we know this because he told us what it was, and then he just built it in 3 dimensions. And it worked. So what happened to me is I observed these phenomena. I wrote them down. And then I worked on the book for 25 years so as to create a workable philosophic science that would help anyone who could read English reasonably well and wants to improve himself or others. So that's what this is about.
What do you want people to do with this newfound information? Like, what do you hope for them?
I want each individual person to use it to improve his life. And let me give you an example. Let's say you have a couple that's been dating for 2 years and they're talking about getting married, right? Big step. Wouldn't it be a reasonable question to ask, why does this person want to marry me? I mean, isn't that a sensible question? I'm not saying to ask the partner. I'm saying look in the book. Look at the scale of motivation. So this guy's been dating this girl for 2 years. He knows her well. So he reads the chapter. He says, oh, I can see. She wants to marry me because she loves me. Level 1. That's level 1 on the scale of motivation, the highest motivation of all. Let's set the date. But maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he looks at it and he says, now that I think about this, I think she wants to marry me because I drive a Lamborghini, I have a 60-foot yacht, I fly my own Learjet, I live in a $15 million condo, and I have $10 million in the bank. See, that's a different motivation. That's level 4 on that scale of motivation, money. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's what it is, okay? Now, what he does with that is up to him. He might say, well, okay, she wants to marry me for my money. That's not new, but she's beautiful, she's funny, she's smart, we get along great, so I'm going to marry her anyway. See? And they set the date and get married, and they lived happily ever after. But that might not happen. He might say, you know what? Now that I realize this, I don't want to marry her. I want to marry somebody who loves me for myself, not because I have a lot of money, and they break up. Now, in that scenario, you might think he would be upset about that, and you would be wrong. He would not. Because he had a realization. He said, now I see why Gertrude did this and this and this and this and this. See, the light bulb went on over his head. That's a positive experience. He's not upset. He's relieved. He's going to say, thank you, Vanessa, for turning me on to this. I dodged a bullet. So That's a perfect example of a common way that anybody could use this book. But you have to realize there are 35 scales, and every situation is different. And most situations can be analyzed according to multiple scales. So let's say you have a girlfriend, your girlfriend Mary. Every time you talk to her, she says, Vanessa, I don't know what I'm going to do. My boyfriend is driving me nuts. You say, really, what's going on? She says, well, look, he's doing drugs now. He gets drunk all the time. He goes to bars and gets in fights. He doesn't treat me with respect, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what I'm going to do. I love him, but I'm very upset. So you say, okay, Mary, look at this. And you open up the book to the scale of relationships, right? You know she can read English, and you put it in front of her face. She's never seen this before. She's going to look at it, and she'll probably say something like, you mean there's a scale of relationships? I never heard of such a thing. You say, yes, this relationship that you've been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale? Guaranteed she's going to want to know that because she's having trouble and you're opening a door for her. See, this is a new idea. There's a scale. So she looks at it. And what's going to happen is in a matter of seconds, she will find a bracket. She'll say something to you like, well, I can see right away. We're definitely not at 1, 2, or 3, because that's the top of the scale. We're having all kinds of trouble. So it's got to be 4, 5, 6, or 7. And you say, okay, go ahead and read the text, and then you can get it exactly. So she reads it. The text is very specific. It goes into granular specificity, what these levels are, how people act when they're at them, how to spot them, etc., etc. So she looks at it. I can see our relationship is at level 5. That's not so great. That's near the bottom of the scale. No wonder we're having a lot of trouble. That explains it. See? And that explains why when I tried to do X, he wanted to do G instead of X. And we had a little difficulty there. See? So now you say, well, you could improve this relationship by moving it from level 5 to level 4. She says, you can? You say, yeah, it tells me in the book how to do that. She says, great, let me borrow this book. I want to go to Fred and straighten this thing out. And you say, wait a minute, before you do that, let me show you something else. And you turn it to the scale of sexuality. Well, that's relevant, isn't it? So she looks at it. The same thing's going to happen. She's going to say, there's a scale of sexuality? You say, yeah. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but where are you on the scale? Guaranteed she's going to want to know that. And she'll give you a bracket. She'll say, well, I can see right off that 6 and 7 have nothing to do with me. So it's got to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, look at the chapter and you can get it exactly. And I guarantee you she's going to want to do that because she's already getting into it. See, she looks at it and says, well, I can see now I'm at level 4. That's not bad. That's the middle of the scale. But she might also say, and Fred, he's at level 5. No wonder we're having trouble. There's a conflict there. See? So I could keep doing what I've been doing for the last 2 minutes, of course, 25 or 35 scales. Because when you have a relationship like that, it's complex. The scale of basic purposes is going to be relevant. The scale of personal influence is going to be relevant. The scale of choice is going to be relevant. She can look at these and say, I see. I'm at this level on this scale. That explains why I do this and this and this. And you see, she's having realizations. So what's happening is she is unraveling this knot in her life. So by the time she analyzes this relationship across 20 or 25 scales, this is not going to be a problem for her anymore. It'll be clear in her mind. She might say, I'm going to show this to Fred and we're going to straighten this all out. And she can do that. Or she might say, I'm done with this guy. This relationship is going nowhere. I'm not going to waste any more time on it. See? And she's not going to be upset about that. She's going to be relieved. She's enhanced now. She understands people better now. And the next mate she looks for, she's going to have this in mind. She's going to say, I wonder what this guy's basic purpose is. I wonder what this guy's scale is on the scale of equanimity. That's a big deal on people, equanimity. If you have that, that's a very important thing. So I'm giving you the gradients for life. So I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Most people have problems, dilemmas, situations, difficulties, and they can't resolve them. More than 99% of the time, it's because they don't know the gradient. That's why you go to a trainer or a psychologist, right? So I've worked as a trainer for people, and some guy might come to you and say, Jim, I'm 100 pounds overweight. I can't fix this. Will you train me? I say, sure. Now, I'm not going to say, here's a 100-pound barbell, lift this, or go out and run 5 miles. That would be malpractice. I'm going to talk to this guy, try to get an idea what he could do. See? And I might say, okay, look, let's see if you can curl 15 pounds, right? So he's doing it, right? As he gets to 12 and he says, I can do this all day. Okay, fine, stop. Let's try 20. And she, well, now I'm feeling it. This is more, okay, good. How many do you think you can do? I can do maybe 15. Okay, great. I want you to do 3 sets of 15 on each arm every day. And at the end of the week, we'll talk again. And then at the end of the week, I would say to him, how did you do? Now, if he says to me, I'm sore, this is tough, I'd say, all right, just keep doing it. If he said to me, this has gotten fairly easy, I might be able to handle more weight, I'd say, great, let's try 25. See, I'm finding the gradient for him. So you cannot make a couch potato into an Olympic athlete. It cannot be done. You can make him into a normal person. And when he's a normal person, you might be able to make him into kind of an amateur weekend athlete, plays a little tennis on the weekend, But there's too many levels in between. And that's true for all these. Now think of it this way. If you're on the first floor and you want to go to the 5th floor, you're going to have to go through the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th in order to get there. Whether you take the stairs or the escalator or the elevator or go outside the building and use a rope ladder. So you can never skip a level on these scales. Impossible. I already know that, okay, from many decades of experience. Because remember, my client would be at this level. He would go up to the next level. That's how I figured this out in the first place. And I just kept recording it and recording it and recording it. Another guy would come in. He'd be at the same level. He would go up to the next level. Same scale, see? Then he, in another session, would be on a different scale. I would spot him at a level on a different scale, and he would go up to the next level on that scale. So this is very user-friendly. So I'm giving you the roadmap for success in life because these are the gradients. The levels are the gradients. So if you're at level 3, you can get to level 2 because it's the next one up, it's the next thing. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how this works. Once you know the actual level of any person on any scale, you can improve that person by moving them up one level on that scale. Now, in engineering, there is a datum that's at least a century old that says 90% of finding the right answer is asking the right question. This goes on in engineering all the time, right? So somebody comes to me with an amplifier. They say, "Will you fix my amplifier?" Okay. So I start checking all the tubes. Well, all the tubes work. See, that was the wrong question. And I say, well, let me look at the power supply. Check, my power supply seems fine. Wrong one. Then I say, what? Let me check this condenser. You have a bad condenser. I put in the condenser. Now it works. See, I asked the right question. That is why Einstein figured out the theory of relativity. He asked that question. That's why Newton figured out the 3 laws of motion, because he asked the question, right? There's the famous story of the apple fell from the tree, and he could see that was the same force that was holding the moon in orbit around the earth. And that's when the whole thing opened up in his mind, see? He had an epiphany, and he wrote it down and gave it to us. And now we still use those. Engineers and scientists still use those 3 laws for space travel. We can calculate celestial bodies and space vehicles using those 3 laws of motion. I mean, obviously, we've gotten a lot further because we've been developing it, but they still work. That's what I'm saying. So that is what this is about. This is natural law, like the Fibonacci sequence. And for those of you who don't know what that means, there are living creatures who have certain numbers of repeating patterns in them. For example, if you take a pine cone, it's got like these little sort of leaves in it that make it. And if you count them one way, you'll get one Fibonacci number. And if you count them another way, you'll get another Fibonacci number. Well, how does that work? The pine cone doesn't even have a brain. It doesn't know anything about math. And there's all kinds of creatures, seashells and sunflower seeds. Now, Fibonacci, who was a brilliant mathematician, looked at this. He said, why do these numbers keep coming up? Why does this number 13 keep showing up in these? See? And this number 5. Why? And he reverse engineered the formula out of those data. He said, what formula, if I had, would explain these as a pattern of numbers? And that's what the Fibonacci sequence is. So now we all know in math what the Fibonacci sequence is, and we can calculate these numbers to infinity. So that's pretty much what I did here. I looked at this data that I saw, and because of my polymathic background, I was able to see it for what it was. And I wrote the book, and the most interesting thing to me is people get this. They get it. You don't have to be a college graduate to get this. If you can read English reasonably well, you read it and say, oh yeah, that makes sense to me, yeah, scale of choice. Now, you might have someone who might question what word I use to explain the phenomenon in a certain place. I can see that because writing is an art. So the most time-consuming aspect of this was expressing this in a way that would make sense to the average person. So I would have to find to describe that level. What are we talking about? How can I say this? I know the phenomenon is there. I can see it. And I'll give you an example. The scale of sexuality. Level 2 on the scale of sexuality is called take it or leave it. There are people who, as regards sexuality, get to this very high level where they can take it or leave it. So that the guy propositions the girl. If he says yes, that's good. And if she says no, that's good too. He can take it or leave it. See, it's a very liberated state to be in. There's no compulsion about it. So I said, well, I'll just call it take it or leave it. That's the name of the level. Because everybody knows what that means. So you put it in the context and people say, yeah, there are people who can take it or leave it. My brother became a priest. Obviously, he could take it or leave it. So that's what I mean by the right word. Now, I spent 25 years trying to get the right word for all of these scales. And no one in the 29 years that this book has existed, no one has ever said to me, I don't think that's the right word. A better word would be this. Also, I can tell you this, since the book first came out 29 years ago, no one has ever said to me, I don't get this. This doesn't make any sense. No one has ever said that. What they say typically is, wow, this is big. So anything that has to do with people, you just go to the appropriate scale. You find where that person is, or it could be yourself, and then you have an epiphany. So like a guy is not getting along with his girlfriend, right? And so he realizes that, there's something about choice. Whenever choice comes up, we have so he looks at the scale of choice. Where is she on the scale of choice? She's at 5. This explains exactly. That's how she behaves at that level. Now he knows what he's dealing with. Now, I'm not saying he should tell her. He can show her the scale and say, look at this. Where do you think you are on this? See? And if he got it right and she's interested, she'll figure it out. Just say, I can see him at level 5. That's not so great. So I tell everybody, never tell anyone who's living his level or another's level on any scale. Now, I do give levels of deceased persons in the book for illumination. And you probably noticed that if you read that sample chapter, I give levels of famous people where they are on that scale. And if you study those people, which I have, you can say, this explains a lot how this guy was. So this is a fruitful source of insight. So here's what happens to people who read this book. So let's say the guy spots himself on the scale of basic purposes, first one in the book. He has an insight. So then he'll say, oh, I'm going to spot my buddy Joe on this, see? And he spots Joe's at this level. That explains why he does X, Y, and Z. Then he says, I wonder where Joe is on the scale of personal influence. See, he's a level 2. That explains a lot about Joe, see? So this guy, what's happening? He's getting smarter. He's having insights. So what happens with this is, the more you use it, the smarter you get. The smarter you get, the more you want to use it. The more you use it, the smarter you get. So this is a virtuous cycle where the person just literally pushes himself up the scales by insight. I can see Millie is at level 3 on the scale of attack. That explains why she gets upset if I want to kill a spider. So this is a very uplifting experience when you use this book. And the people who use it, they tell me this all the time. I continually get this about, wow, this really is helping me. And the reason is, it's natural law. I stumbled upon it, and because of my polymathic background, I was able to see it for what it was. And then I was able, or I should say willing, to spend 25 years to perfect it. So I invite your viewers to check this out, because if you can read English and you want to improve yourself for another, this is for you. Now, you might say, well, let's take some guy, he's got 180 IQ, he's got $25 million in the bank, and he's got a physique like Charles Atlas. Does he need this book? Well, wait a minute. He's got a daughter who's getting into drugs. He's got a son who's getting into fistfights. He's got a wife who's cheating on him. See, in each of those cases, he can say, come over here, let me show you this. And he can get the kid to figure out what's going on, and so he's not having fistfights. So it works for anybody, whether you want to use it on yourself or others. But I can tell you this, I know for a fact, less than 1% of the human race is at or near the top of all the scales. Most of us are high in some scales and low in others. A larger percentage are at the bottom of the scales, about 4%. These are the dregs of society. Let's say you find some guy, he's a professional criminal, he's a gang member, he's a drug addict, right? And he beats up women. That guy is at or near the bottom of most of these scales, if not all. That's why he's like that. He's not going to benefit from this book. He doesn't want to read this book. He wants to clean out your bank account and steal your wife. That's all he knows, see? Otherwise, he wouldn't be like that. So this is for people like you who are interested in humanity, who are interested in how do we get better? How do we improve humanity? Because I already know from dealing with this for many decades, this applies across all demographic backgrounds. It does not matter what race, what ethnicity, what gender, what education level, what socioeconomic level. None of that matters, because every person is at some level on every scale, including the people at the bottom who are never going to read this book. So sometimes I bump into somebody, whether online or in 3 dimensions, and I can see that this guy is at or near the bottom of a certain scale. I say, whoa, I don't want to mess with this guy. Have a nice day. Goodbye. We're done. And so I can absolutely guarantee that this book will prevent catastrophes, dilemmas, bankruptcies, lawsuits, indictments, fistfights, etc., 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 because you are forewarned about the downscale people. It also helps you with the upscale people, right? So you meet some person and say, oh, this guy is very upscale. He's high in the level of literacy. He's high in the scale of scholarship. He's high in the scale of human ability. He's high in the scale of basic purposes. I want this guy in my life. You see? So this is very useful to people. And that's why I went through all this trouble. And that's why I'm doing these interviews, so that people find out about this and use it. Because I have to tell you, Once you have the book, you don't need anything else. I went out of my way, working on this for 25 years, to write it in such a way that once you own the book, you do not need anything else, except maybe a dictionary. But I would say that for every book on earth. I've been tutoring people since I was 14, and I would never tutor anybody without having a dictionary handy. But everybody has a dictionary in his cell phone now. But that's all you really need, because it's self-evident. It's universally applicable. The better your facility with the English language, the easier it will be. But that's true for every book on earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if a guy is highly literate, you can give him War and Peace and he'll go right through it, right? And if he's not so good, he's going to say, oh, this is difficult, look up words. But that's what this book is about. It's to help people have better lives. This is my reward.
I think it is very admirable that you spent such a long period of time on this work, and people will definitely benefit from reading it. So thank you for dedicating 25 years to making this book happen. Where can people find information on the book, the website, all of the social handles where they can follow you?
Right. I want to invite your viewers to my website, which is septimics.com, septemics, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself, and there's even a pre-recorded introduction to Septimics that you can listen to, which explains to a new person in 15 minutes what this is about. So that's my recommendation. Go there and check it out. And this could be a life-changing experience, because that's what people keep telling me. I have serious students who, have studied this book, and, they're just effusive and thanking me and saying, wow, because here's the way you experience it. This is like picking up a lens and looking at yourself in the mirror through a lens. You know how Sherlock Holmes was always going around with a lens, right? That's what it's like. Each of these scales is a lens, which you can use to view your spouse or your mother or your boss or whoever, or yourself in the mirror. And when you see it, you'll say, now I see what's going on here. But that's on one scale. There are 35 scales, so you can keep doing it and getting more understanding.
So in addition to reading the book, what is your message to humanity?
Well, let me say one sentence that puts this all into focus. The data in this book are vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Thank you so much for being here, Jim.
Thanks, Vanessa. It was a pleasure talking to you.